Hi everyone. As promised, I'm presenting a two-part series for new candidates of the Thousand Validator Programme. This video is intended to help candidates onboard by answering some of the common questions in a bit more depth than is available on existing learning resources. This is based on my experience, so I do hope it helps you. Okay, let's get into it. So I'm doing two videos because the content is so large and it may be a bit much to digest all in one. So the first video we are going to cover rules and nominations. Rules, we will go through each one of the 1KV rules and I will lend some of my experience based on it and we'll look at the consequences. In the nomination section, we'll be looking at the nomination algorithm, how it works, and what can be your expectations. In the second video, we focus primarily on upgrading, which is the bulk of the second video, and we touch on rewards. And what is rewards? Rewards in this case will be what is your benefit, how much KSM should you expect, how many dots should you expect, and the like. Okay, so let's get into it. Rules. There are 7 of them, the last one being so recent that I'm not seeing it on any existing learning resources. The first deals with your on-chain identity. The second deals with that minimum amount you need to have in your stash. Third, your node must be connected to the private telemetry. 4, you must charge no more than whatever the ceiling limit is. We'll get into those details. 5, you must have a separate stash and controller account. 6 deals with the upgrading time, what time frame you have to upgrade. And 7 deals with payments. Okay, so let's look at on-chain identity. The identity needs to be applied to the stash account and not the controller. There's no benefit really to applying an identity to your controller account. It is reflected as a green tick, and I use that in the quotes because it's really a white tick with a green background. So that's a little peeve of mine, but the common term is green tick. Sub-identities are accepted and commonly used for ledger-based stash accounts. So I will explain that a little more because to achieve a primary identity, you need to use an on-chain account. An on-chain account can be created directly from polkadot.js/apps or it can be created via the extension. Now, those are the easy ones, the easy methods to create an on-chain account. A ledger account cannot create a primary identity. So you can't have a primary identity on your ledger account. And most would want to use a ledger account for their stash because, it's a hardware wallet and, added layer of security and that like. So what you can do is create an on-chain account using Polkadot.js, and then in the accounts page, there's a menu button that's the 3 dots. You click on that and you hit set sub-identities and you choose your stash, which was created with the ledger account, as your sub-identity. And what does this do? This creates, if we look at the image that I have there with paranodes, it puts the sub-identity as a whole is represented as your primary identity / the name that you put as your sub-identity. So my primary identity is paranodes.io and my sub-identity is 0, 1 and a rocket. Now, emojis can be copy-pasted from Riot or other platforms. You just copy-paste it in, and in my opinion, it gives a little pop when looking at the names on the target page. So this table is just a visual representation of some very short words. If you're validating on day 3, the day before it, I don't advise that you change your identity. Why? Because changing your identity, if you are very comfortable with it and you're using the automated fields, which would be Twitter, Riot, and email, then you can take a chance. But if you don't get it verified in time, let's say you're using a website or you have your full name or something, your legal name inputted, it will take a bit longer and is subject to the availability of the registrar. So based on if you already had a primary identity and you're looking to change any of those fields or anything like that, gauge your timing, right? You should have some experience based on your initial submission, how long it takes. And you should also get a gauge to when the nomination bot actually nominates you, right? So those are the kind of things that you need to take a look at. But to be absolutely safe, if you do it after you have just validated, you should be fine, because you give yourself a larger window for any errors that may occur. Okay, so this is not a really, it's just some general good advice. You try to put yourself in the best possible situation, and that's why I'm mentioning it. So you can make your own decisions. Now, what happens if it is that you don't have an identity on your stash, or you're still requesting judgment or something like that? Then the bot skips you and you have to wait till the next time it looks to do nominations, which would be 24 hours. So you lose a day. Okay? Minimum stash. And I combined this one with the separate controller and stash because, it seemed to be a good pairing. So your stash must have 50 KSM or 5,000 DOT bonded funds, right? So the funds doesn't only need to be there, it needs to be bonded. For the DOT program, the rewards destination must be the stash and it must be staked. You must have a separate account for your stash and a separate account for your controller. And some candidates use their primary identity account as their controller just to minimize the number of accounts that they have. And because an on-chain account uses a password versus the ledger where you actually need to plug it in, it adds a layer of convenience. So it's something that you need to consider if you wish to take that route. If it is that you fall short on any one of these items, the nomination bot will skip you until it's corrected. Okay, so all of these things are automated. So don't try to test the system. The system, it checks. I've seen so many cases that people come on and they have not bonded the funds, though that one is a bit less. But we may see that they may use the same account for their stash and their controller. So these things come about and the system is automated with no bias. You got to fix it. So don't test the system. Private telemetry. Now this one seems quite easy, but it always poses a problem. And only yesterday I had to help someone who they removed this because they didn't understand its need. So I will try to emphasize that here, and hopefully you don't make that mistake. So you must connect to the W3F private telemetry. To do so, add this flag. That's the flag in pink. Now this is the back end. This actually gives your information to this special telemetry, and there's a URL for the front end as well, which it mimics the public one in every single way. New candidates are required to accumulate 7 days of online time when connected to this endpoint. So it doesn't matter what time you get into the 1KV special room. You should try to connect to this telemetry as soon as possible. This task lies on the critical path. So the sooner, I'm using a project management term there, you need to get onto it as soon as possible. Once your node is up and running, connect. That's my humble advice, and you will get into the active set sooner than later. Okay, so don't wait until you get into the 1KV room to connect. Connect as soon as you can, and then do your application form and wait that time. Okay, so you need to ensure that the name that you submit in your application matches exactly to the name in telemetry. It is case sensitive. It does not remove white spaces. If you're using an emoji, put it in. Now, another thing I would like to note here is that this telemetry is not used by the public, the general nominators. This is really used by, for the 1KV. The 1KV can tap into the telemetry, this special one, and retrieve your online status and your version. If it is that you don't match, you're not on this telemetry, the system is not going to recognize that you are online, and your time is not going to be, your 7 days is not going to be counted down, if you want to put it that way. So I would recommend 2 things. One, visit the telemetry for this special backend. You visit the front end and make sure that you're there. Make sure that your spelling is exactly the same as found on the 1KV leaderboard. And finally, on your 1KV leaderboard, make sure that your time is decreasing, or actually, well, you may want to say increasing, so that it says that last activity, you're seeing some progress that shows that you are connected and your time is moving in the right direction. Now, if it is that you are not connected to this telemetry, well, if you're a new candidate, your 7 days is not going to progress. That's 1. If you make any updates, the system is not going to recognize you. So that's 2. And if it is now, let's flip it, that you are now you have passed your probationary period of 7 days and you're actively validating and you're not connected, then the system says you are not online, but you are actively validating or something of that nature, and you could get faulted. One of the ways that this can happen is if you upgrade during an active session and you forget to include this, or somehow or the other this telemetry flag gets dropped. It sounds weird, but it happens very often that people forget about this or don't see the importance of it, or they're using a script that by default has the public telemetry. Again, only yesterday I dealt with this, and the user, again, IT-based person, someone who is so should be like an expert in the field, they just took it off, and now because they took it off when they did an upgrade, the board saw them as having the previous version, which was in this case 0.97, and even though they upgraded, they're saying, hey, I upgraded, but the system doesn't know that you upgraded because you never connected to it again to say that you moved from 0.97 to 0.98. So it's a bit long-winded, but this needs to be treated with respect and understanding. So please do so as you go about your duties. Commission. Well, this one's pretty easy. You just stay within the limits. So on Kusama, you're between 0 and 10%. Any figure and the limits are inclusive. So you can go up to 10% and you can go down to 0%. And as applied to Polkadot, it's 0 and 3% respectively. Now, if you wish to use decimals, or fractions thereof, or whatever the case may be, you need to use an extrinsic specifically, because on the staking page, it only allows integers. Only allows integers, so you can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Whole numbers, but you can't do the fractions. So to do so, you go to Developer, Extrinsic, you select your stash account to the top, as I have in the picture, and the extrinsic you're going to use is Staking Validator Prefs. Now, in that field that says commission, you cannot put a decimal still, but you can represent your commission in such a manner that the number 1 billion is equivalent to 1%. So you can do your adjustments from there to whatever percentage that you're looking for. Now, if it is that your commission goes over for whatever reason, then you are not eligible for the active set, and the bot will skip you. And even if you do it when you're nominating, the system will detect. So don't test the system, right? It's evolved and over time to cater for these scenarios. What I would recommend is, if you have an idea of what may happen, you can discuss it with Will, right? If you have an idea of a workaround or some way to beat the system, discuss it with Will, and don't try a practical. Okay, so version upgrades. I'm going to quote this first one. Major releases must be implemented within 12 hours and all other releases within 24. Major releases just means high priority within 12 and everything else within 24. As simple as I can put it. And ensure that your telemetry does not change and your validator name does not change after an upgrade. You need to verify that. So the second one, version information is obtained from telemetry. So again, reinforcement. Historically, if you are ineligible due to version-related issues, it takes a longer time to restore. So I recommend upgrading sooner than later. Don't wait for that last hour. Keep posted in the Validator Lounge for version releases and announcements when new versions are coming up. So I think Parity actually sent out a questionnaire with regards to version upgrades and the notifications and stuff like that. So there is an interest in making sure that the validators know that a version is coming and they need to take action. I also want to emphasize that after you upgrade, stick around, because only with 0.98, those who upgraded via binary, there was a small issue with the binary that would lead to less optimal performance, and the binary needed to just be, this is the pre-compiled one, needed to be recompiled. And we had to download a new version, or I should say, a new version of the precompiled, but the source wasn't changed. Now, if you weren't sticking around, keeping abreast of these things, you may have skipped that, and your node may have been unstable, or you may have seen some kind of erratic behavior if you're using the precompiled binary. So these are things to watch out for, and there have been occasions where we have needed to downgrade, right? So these are things that you need to, this is your responsibility. So I I do trust that you will conform and try your best to keep up to date. And the last one is no excuses, right? Even myself in my early days, there was some buzz after an update that the new version was using a lot of resources and so on. So it was a low priority update, and I opted to stretch it to the 24 hours, hoping that there would be some resolve, or maybe a intermediate version, like a dash 1 or something. And I got caught, right? And I was marked as invalid for a brief period of, a period of time that I expected to be brief. But with regards to point 3, historically you are in a job, that one, it took like 24 hours for me to for the leaderboard to reflect that I was on the latest version. So I don't know the reason for that. Maybe it has improved, but I lend you my experience that you should upgrade sooner than later. No excuses. Payments. Payments should be issued within 20 eras of it being generated. That is 5 days on Kusama and 20 days on Polkadot. If you don't issue the payment, it will be paid out automatically and you will lose 3 rank points. Okay, so all of the others that I've mentioned prior, including the upgrade, once it is, you will just be skipped from nomination, and once it's fixed, you're back in. In this case, you get something, you lose rank points, and rank points are gained when you successfully validate within the nomination period. So that will be all 4 eras without an issue. And if you do so, you get a rank point. And 25 rank points are required for you to validate on Polkadot. And even though you're validating on Polkadot, if the connected stash, and I say connected, it's just via the form that you use this as your reference. If the stash that you used in your form falls below rank 25, you will no longer be eligible for nominations on the Polkadot side. Right? So get that relation. Right? So you lose 3 rank points. And one of the common things that happens is when you're doing manual payouts on Polkadot.js, you only focus on 2 days. It's the default. So if there was a payout that was 3 or 4 days old, you won't see it. So my recommendation is to flick that toggle, or to choose the option that says max 84 eras. Now let's take a look at some tools. With regards to online notifications, there are Telegram bots, and I will send to the end of the second video, there will be like a resource page that you can take a look at. Version upgrades, you can get official emails from Will from Parity, so you can use that link to get there. There are automated tools that actually upgrade your system, with each new release. Pretty cool. And there are 2 very popular options for automatic payments. All right, and those are the links below. So nominations. Let's get into this one. This is a bit large of a topic, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Nominations are facilitated by an automated system which uses weighted metrics to determine which candidates are nominated. The source code for this is publicly available at, and I put the URL. One of the more important pages, at least to me, is the constraints page, which has the weights for all the measurable criteria, and you can follow through to see how those criteria are established. Okay, so we look at the weights, and this is taken almost copy pasted from the constraints page. And these are so we have the weights by name, then we have the weights by, of course, their weight, and then there's a guide. Now, if you adhere to the guide, not to confuse you, if you adhere to the guide, then you get a better score on the as compared to the weight. So when we look at inclusion, even though you're going down, you want the lower is better. It doesn't mean that the lower the weight is better. It means that if you are not included very often, you get a higher score. And the like. So when it says higher is better, it means that if you have a higher rank, you get a higher score. Okay, so just to put that in context. So let's take a look at the weights by name, and I will describe what the weight is. So inclusion refers to inclusion in the active set, and it differs from the one below that says span inclusion, in that this inclusion means that your inclusion since inception versus the span inclusion, which is the inclusion within the nomination span, which is usually about 1 week, 6 days, something along those lines. So those members who have, let's say, graduated from the program and are independent of the W3F nomination, they will have inclusions, very high inclusions, because they are in almost every active set, or let's say every active set they are included. So their number, according to the guide, their inclusion will be higher, resulting in a lower score. Okay, I know this could be confusing, so I do have a table to the next slide that I hope will help. Okay, but you just need to remember that when you achieve what's in the guide, you get a better score. So if you are not included very often, you get a higher score. Okay, so I discussed inclusion, span inclusion, discovered. Well, earlier is preferred. This is just when, this is something that you really can't change. So this is really when you join the program. Okay, so you can't really change that one. That's a fixed, a constant. So, right? Nominated. So if you were not nominated in a while, so the longer the time goes by when you're not nominated, your score goes up. Rank, as discussed, every time that you successfully, within a nomination period, complete the period without an incident, you get a rank point. And the higher your rank, the better this score that you will get. So if you in the program quite often and your rank is really high, you do get a little bump. Unclaimed. This has to do with those payments, and basically you want to wrap up or claim your payments ASAP. Right? A clean slate is good, and you get 15 points for that one. Bonded. Now, even though you're required to have that minimum bond, 50 KSM or 5,000 DOT, you can go higher, and by going higher with your bond, you can get a few more points on this weight. Now, it is relative to the other validators in the program. So if you look at the 1 kV board, it gives you a nice, I think it's a box whisker diagram that you can take a look at where you're positioned in regards to the average and, you know, the outliers and those sort of things. So it's pretty cool. And again, the higher you are in that relative chart, the better points, more weights that you get, more point weight. Faults, you want as few faults as possible, 0 being the best, and you get 5 points. Offline, lower time is preferred, and 2 points. Now this is not, as you will see, offline is not extremely weighted extremely heavily, right? But it's not meant to be punitive, but it is just meant to be a little more of an encouragement. Okay, so let us take a look at these scores in context of a nomination on day 0 and a nomination on day 6. So you were nominated on day 0, and this is like your first nomination. So you were never included in the active set before. So everything is fresh, and you get 125 points. And because your points are so high, the system takes it looks at the nominators with the highest points and it nominates them. As many as it could take with the highest points, it takes those and nominates them. Now, if we look at day 1, after you have validated on day 0, your inclusion overall, which is the top one, it goes down a bit because now you have some inclusion in the active set. But it doesn't go down that much because, I mean, these are all relative numbers. These are not pre-calculated. These are just there for demonstration purposes. So you go down a little. You were just within the span, so you get 0 points for the span inclusion. And discovery, all of those in gray, I'm just leaving them as is because I'm going to assume that they are constants and they are only changed by exception. So if you get a fault, it changes by exception, things like that. If you change your bond, it would be affected by exception. So let's just focus on the green ones, the span inclusion and the nomination. As we see, as days go by, those numbers are increasing because your span inclusion, the time goes by and you are not being nominated, you're not in the active set, so the number increases on both span inclusion and nomination. Now, one may think that if you are nominated, you should be included in the active set, and it's not always the case. So that's why there are two separate metrics for this. Okay, so as we go along the days, I think it's fairly obvious to see the numbers increase, and on day 6, your number increases to the point that you have 124 points, and now you are eligible for the active, eligible to be nominated because you keep going up, and you can go into the active set. And those who just were nominated, they are like starting over day 1 and so on. So this is how the system has its cycle, that it gets someone in, and then after they're in, their score goes down, somebody takes their place, and so on and so on and so on, and it rotates. Because new entrants have never been included in the active set, and perhaps due to the discovery as well, they get a few more rotations in the earlies. But after about a month or maybe a few weeks, things normalize. So don't set your expectations based on your first few weeks of validation. Okay, so nominations, you don't need to memorize this, but what you need to know is that these are the accounts that you'll be nominated with are not random. They are fixed, right? They may change, right, in the future if accounts are split or something like that, but in general, they are fixed. So you need to kind of keep an eye on them, just need to know what they are, because sometimes people get nominated and they think they get nominated by a whale, and it's really one of the nomination accounts. So yeah, I don't want to curb your enthusiasm, but just keep note so that you know, okay, I got nominated by somebody. It sounds like a whale. Let me just cross-reference. Oh, it was the 1KV. Okay, so nominations, we can go to this website and take a look at, your nomination order, if we look at that column, and lower is better. So 1, 2, 3, 4 means that this is the next person to be nominated. 1, 2, 3, 4, the next 4 to be nominated. So in this case, now if you sort by nomination order, lower is better. Now there are alternative sites like Vegas. This is Chris on Riot, and Hirish has pages also. I don't see him as active, but he's around. Vegas uses the aggregate, so in his page he uses the aggregate score. So if you sort by aggregate score, you would want the highest score to represent those who are going to be nominated next. Okay, so there are some concepts that I'm mentioning. If you need clarity, you can check me on Riot or Discord. But these are the concepts, and if you understand them, you will have fewer questions to ask. Okay, with that, I give you some time to eat some popcorn, get some refreshments, bathroom break, and I will see you back for part 2. Take care and bye.